The never-ending war between the Skaven and the Lizardmen claims more and more lives every time they cross paths in the field of battle. It was during a furious storm of dark magic that the rat and the serpent would clash again. When the dark magic that flows into the world concentrates and grows powerful, it can take the form of crystallized stones that glow with a sickly greenish shade. This is more commonly known as warpstone, and despite its many risks, it is highly coveted by necromancers, alchemists and sorcerers alike. Yet none scour this rare substance more than the Skaven. Warpstone is used by the Ratmen to power their twisted technology and to enhance their obscure magic spells. The resource is so favoured by the Skaven that it is even used as a currency within their society. Skaven warlocks are commonly known to look incessantly for this resource to power their crazy inventions. Ikit Claw, the master warlock engineer clan scryer, is able to blend arcane sorceries with technology in an insane and mind-boggling mix. His ability to blur the line between science and the power of magic is nothing less than remarkable. In his own quest for knowledge, the Skaven warlock mangled his body after a failed experiment exploded, nearly killing him. An intricate iron mask of his own invention now covers his hairless skull, and a cunningly wrought exoskeleton aids his withered left side. A chaotic storm of raw magic formed just above the sacred temple in Lustria. Warpstone meteorites were plummeting from the skies and onto the landscape below, the very fabric of reality itself torn as large chunks of the precious stone crashed violently against the temple, melting its foundations and damaging most of the structure beyond repair. Ikit Claw had really outdone himself. His newest invention, the Warpstone Tractor Beam, a device capable of pulling giant chunks of warpstone from orbit, was finally working as intended.
Ikit has the biggest brain of all rats! Such a simple, masterful scheme. Yes.
Ikit Claw dispatched a Skaven force led by Warlock engineer Skrull Blackfinger to get a hold of all the precious resources he could, his warpstone detector vibrating like an earthquake. A cohort of Lizardmen, led by the Prophet of Sotek, marched out of the collapsing ruins to stop the Skaven horde, their cold instincts indicating only one thing: to kill the Ratmen and protect the sacred treasures within the temple. The cold-blooded warriors were supported by an ancient salamander, pterodon riders, temple guard and a host of skinks. The skink priest was up in the air, coordinating formations and advancing forward to take the nearby hill, a strategic position that could decide the fate of the battle. The Skaven poured down through the blasted plains, heading straight to the temple, a glorious tide of filthy vermin ready to consume those who stood before them. But Skrull Blackfinger knew the value of patience, and despite the strong impulse to rush into the warpstone-filled temple, he halted the advance. Indistinguishable to the average eye, dozens of Chameleon skinks waited undetected near the Skaven army. They were hiding behind the Ratmen lines when their surprise attack was noted by the Warlock. With a roar, a group of hulking rat ogres charged them, their mutated limbs moving surprisingly fast for a rat of that size. However, the Chameleons were also fast and managed to put some distance between them and the beasts, while doing further damage with missile fire. The Warlock engineer turned his gaze towards the front lines where the Lizardmen army were beginning to emerge over the hill.
Gather the fallen warpstone! All the warpstone! Second, make all these stinking reptiles die! Murder, death, kill devices at the ready!
With an order, the Skaven fire teams shifted and opened fire. Rattling guns began to howl and spit their firepower towards the nearby salamander hunting pack. The pack was unprepared for the overwhelming barrage of warp-laced bullets and fell back behind the hill to regroup and find a safer place in which to fire back at the Vermintide. The rattling guns didn't waste any time and quickly found new targets to fire upon. The Skaven fire teams screamed and laughed with a maniacal frenzy while unloading their shots onto the Lizardmen ranks. The bullets streaking through the air, leaving faint greenish traces. With the skies roaring above them and the battlefield trembling, the lines clashed with a deafening sound. Hordes of rats streamed forward in a cloud of claws and madness, their sheer numbers overwhelming the cold-blooded force trying to stop them and their devastating firepower proving to be debilitating to the Lizardmen's efforts. The Prophet of Sotek urged his troops onwards. All the Lizardmen were determined to protect their temple and its ancient plaques and relics. Sora's warriors killed without remorse, blows from their blades and axes cutting through flesh and ragged cloth. Lines were engaged and the battle line constantly shifted. One moment the Lizardmen were advancing and cutting through their venomous foe, and the other, the Skaven were overwhelming their enemies and turning the tide in their favour. In the centre of the battlefield, the Lizardmen cohort of red-crested skinks fought unrelentingly against a unit of plague monk censer bearers. The holy warpstone gases leaking from their spiked orbs dissolved the air with an unnatural energy. The Skaven, fighting with primal fury, looked to seize their ultimate prize. The Lizardmen, holding their ground, determined to protect their ancient home. The plains constantly shook by the impacts of green comets crashing nearby. The air was filled with the raw smell of magic and thousands of sounds from the raging battle. A diabolical machine, a warp lightning cannon, fired incessantly at the targets that came too close. Most of his shots were aimed at the Prophet of Sotek himself. The skink priest had already suffered some wounds from the cannon, and taking it down quickly became a priority. One unit of Lizardmen, Temple Guard, and a group of skinks managed to get through the Skaven lines and into charging distance from the warp lightning cannon. Their task was to attack the crew and prevent the machine from firing. Skrull Blackfinger saw this manoeuvre and charged towards the advancing force. This encounter would typically prove deadly to any Warlock engineer. The Temple Guard are the elite infantry of the Lizardmen and could easily take down a single Skaven in melee combat, but Blackfinger was no ordinary Warlock, and the Temple Guard was soon led into a trap. A unit of rattling guns quickly formed a firing line and unleashed their ammunition on the Temple Guard. Their shields and plaques cracking from explosive impacts, each hit exploding into a small cloud of poisonous dust. The skinks accompanying them were quickly overwhelmed by the nearby storm vermin protecting the Warlock, and soon enough the temple guards were in trouble. In the rear of the Skaven lines, the Chameleon skinks had already taken down several rat ogres with exceptional coordination and unceasing fire. However, each brute proved to be very hard to kill, and so they had to concentrate their efforts on keeping the rat ogres out of the main engagement. Clouds of warpstone dust drifted through the entire battlefield, with increasing intensity, driving the Ratmen into a crazed state of frenzy. The situation was getting worse and worse for the Lizardmen. Without decisive action, the battle would be lost. Harnessing his powers and whispering an ancient spell from the lore of beasts, the Prophet of Sotek summoned a Manticore. It worked. The fearsome beast emerged from within the main lines of the Skaven, sending a handful of Ratmen flying. The Manticore began to tear apart the Ratmen and caused havoc amongst the lines. When the beast took to the sky, it was quickly attacked with unrelenting fire. The Warlock Master kept fighting without stopping, using his masterful use of machines and sorcery blended together to create an impressive killing machine. The Skaven fire teams turned their fire towards the Lizardmen's general. When the flying skink fell from the skies under a hail of missiles, the Lizardmen army began to retreat back into the temple. The red-crested skinks, at the sight of their general falling, kept on fighting with even more ferocity, determined to buy time for the rest of the army to flee and take the wounded body of the general into safety. The Skaven had won the day, and soon enough Ikit Claw would have all the warpstone he needed for his next project. However, after personally checking over the vast quantities of warpstone harvested, Ikit noticed a slight error in his formulas. The tractor beam had caught less than anticipated. Clearly not an error on his side, as he was the most brilliant Warlock engineer there was. He quietly ordered Skull's assassination. No one stole from Ikit Claw. Thank you for watching. On this channel we are putting together Total War cinematic battles and Warhammer lore videos. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support our work, you can now directly sponsor the channel through Patreon and help us in the making of more videos. Find the link in the description below, and see you on the next one.